Welcome to TypeScript FM, the friendly podcast for TypeScript developers where we bring you news, updates, and interviews from the community with plenty of tomfoolery sprinkled in. I'm your host, Kamran Ayub, and I'm joined by my co-host and best bud, Eric Onerheim. Together, we're the two TypeScript fools. Welcome to the show. Welcome.
Welcome. It's news for the week of May 19th, 2025.
That's right. We were pretty busy this week, weren't we?
Yeah, I was traveling internationally this week.
Yeah, how did it go?
It went really, really well. So I was at NDC Oslo this last week and gave a talk called JavaScript Blazingly Fast. And I have a link to the slides in the show notes. But it went really well. I had a really great time in Oslo and met up with some family, bought a whole mess of chocolate back. I'm super jet lagged still.
Yeah.
And it's been like 3 days since I landed.
Did you use that app I told you about?
I didn't. Everyone's like, you got to use this app. And it was the app. I think it was the app that you suggested.
Time Shifter. Yep,
yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Everyone's like, yo, use this app. I'm like, oh, it's too late now.
I told you. Sometimes I have good ideas.
Yeah. Well, you have good ideas most of the time. I just refuse to listen.
That's cool. The keynote, you also said that it was awesome, wasn't it?
Yeah, it echoed a lot of my feelings about LLMs with regards to coding.
Mm-hmm.
And the message was from Layla, be skeptical of LLMs when you're writing code.
Yeah, it's good. And we'll link to it once it's available. Usually NDC recordings are available like the week after.
Yeah, there's a time delay, and I'll make sure that I make a note and send that out on Blue Sky.
Yep. And we'll mention it too, maybe on either the Thursday episode or next Tuesday, whenever yours is available, so people can watch and learn how to make JavaScript fast. Because is JavaScript slow?
No, it's not slow. Like a lot of people like to say it is, and maybe in the past that was true, but modern JavaScript is very, very fast.
Yeah. That'll be cool. We have a few resources too in the community highlights that we'll link to. It was similar for me. I didn't get to go anywhere for Microsoft Build, but I attended the keynote, both keynotes actually. And surprise, surprise, it was just AI all the way down. Like basically the whole thing was just all about AI and Azure AI Foundry, which by the way, previous Build, they had announced or they had talked about Azure AI Studio. Well, I guess, and I haven't confirmed this, but based on everything that I've seen, that's the new name for Azure AI Studio is Azure AI Foundry. So they've renamed it to make things, less confusing. But that was kind of interesting. I mean, there were some things that were sort of interesting. NL Web is like an open source project that they are working on, where it essentially is like a glue layer for websites to add conversational AI on top of. So basically, I think what the plan is like Edge and maybe some other browsers, they're going to have like an MCP server in them. And if your website talks with NL Web, which is based on schema.org JSON, it'll just automatically provide an interface to speak with your website. So people can like ask it questions and stuff if you expose through their spec. As far as I understand, but I haven't really like looked into it, but I'll link to it in case, people find that kind of interesting. Otherwise, I mean, I'm sort of interested in some of the AI stuff so that I can either, teach it or make stuff with it and maybe even like, I don't know, get certified at some point with some of the Azure AI stuff because people are using it. A lot of enterprises are using it, not so much like startups and stuff or like even individual people don't usually use it just because it's definitely more enterprise oriented. So a lot of customers that they have are using it. So if I want to do training and stuff for Pluralsight, it'll probably make sense to sort of learn it. Otherwise, over the weekend, I did do some open source development. I released a new version of my IGDB.NET SDK.
Woohoo!
Yeah, so IGDB is the metadata source of truth for my app. It has all the game data. It's like a community-powered wiki type deal. But they have a really nice API, and they're going through a migration process that's going to be completed in August. Someone actually opened up a PR to make all the changes necessary for that migration. And so I just mostly approved it and then added some test coverage and a few things. And then I upgraded a few things behind the scenes for it. But anyway, that felt kind of nice to get that out the door. All right. Should we get into some of the news?
There's a big one.
There is.
TypeScript is announcing a native preview, so you don't have to build the TS Go from source anymore.
That's
and
right.
It's going to be under @TypeScript/native preview, native-preview in NPM.
That's right. And it comes with a preview VS Code extension, which is available in the marketplace. You just have to search for TypeScript native and it'll come up in the marketplace extensions. So we've actually covered a lot of the progress that TS Go has made. But just to recap, most of the type checker features are ported. That includes JSX and JavaScript and JSDoc support. Obviously, there's major speed improvements. We know that. I think it's more of like an up to 10x. It's not like an immediate 10x improvement, because I saw reports on Blue Sky where people were saying that it did improve things, but it wasn't 10x. So I think it really just depends on how much you're using it and like the size of your code base. They've got the early editor support with LSP with some of those completions. There's still ongoing work there, so it's not all done there. There's ongoing work for auto importing, find all references. So a lot of the refactor features are not quite there yet. And then they have a beginnings of an API layer for integration. And as far as I understand, it's a new native Node.js module, but I haven't looked into that. I don't know if you know a little bit more about that.
I don't. One thing to keep in mind, too, is the LSP that they're doing is actually implementing the LSP protocol, because TypeScript completions predate the LSP protocol. It's its own beast. It was like a bespoke implementation for VS Code. So now in the new world order where every language implements the LSP protocol, they're doing that now. So that's like a whole greenfield effort.
Nice. Oh, and then another thing is that it doesn't do declarations yet. So if you need emit declarations, it will not do that quite yet. But that's
right.
coming. And then just to be clear too, the native preview is going to eventually become TypeScript 7.
Mm-hmm.
So what you see in TypeScript native is going to be coming in 7.0, not 6.0, which is the next version after 5. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing to keep in mind is that the native preview is based off of a snap of, I think, 5.7. So they haven't ported all of the new things since that snap. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
Does that include erasable syntax only then?
I would guess, but
Okay.
I would have to check for sure.
Okay, cool. I was going to mention that I did install the preview on VS Code in the extension because, as we mentioned before, we can't quite use TS Go natively with Excalibur because we have different import types that we need to support, like CSS and PNGs and things like that. So we're waiting until something like tsdown can support the native port, but we can still open it in Visual Studio Code, and we can still use the language server and get syntax highlighting and type checking in the editor. So I did install it, and at least in my testing, I noticed zero latency when trying to open up the Excalibur code base. And you were telling me that you could definitely notice latency with the OG TypeScript server.
Oh, yeah.
But you didn't get a chance to test it because I don't think there's a NeoVim extension yet? ?
I don't think there is. I'll have to go look.
Okay.
But the fact that they're working on a new LSP protocol extension means that providing a NeoVim plugin for it is going to be very easy.
Okay, cool. It would be kind of funny if after this we checked and there actually was one. You'll have to go check and let us know if you find one.
Yeah, I'll put it on there if there is one.
I really want to know because you're the one who works in the code base like daily, right? So you would know better than me like how much latency you would expect. But like I didn't notice anything. I was just double clicking on files and it was just immediately highlighted and type checked. So
yeah, it's pretty slow in the old one just because of the number of files that we have and the size of the code base.
Yeah.
It does take a moment, and if you're like, oh, you want to simulate the slowness, just restart the TypeScript server and you'll feel it.
Yeah, and I did that multiple times with the experimental one and it was just immediately back. So I think that speaks to a lot of the speed improvements, but hopefully we can do some more, scientific testing and get back to you.
Qualitatively, it seems ripping fast.
Yeah, that's right. Well, obviously, we'll link to the announcement post that goes into a lot more detail. But I was curious, Eric, you watched the Microsoft Build session with Anders. That was one of the highlights of Microsoft Build was the TypeScript native Go native port session with Anders. What can you tell us?
Well, there was a couple of really neat things that came out of that. One is that they're highly attuned to the criticism of Go, like especially around Go and WASM. And they've been taking a look at that with the Go team. So it sounds like there's some good collaboration happening there. Obviously, there's nothing public yet. So I'm optimistic about the Go and the WASM support around Go. Go acknowledges that the WASM support could be better. Mm-hmm. Part of the issue, and it's not a blocker really, and they address this in the talk, is that they can't really make use of Go's multi-threading in WASM yet. That's a thing that just isn't there. So that could be better. And that's part of like a good half of the speed up from the new native TypeScript is this multi-threading so they can work on files independently. Mm-hmm. That is a big hit. Now, there's also some other things that aren't so great. They're kind of in the weeds. But if you were to spin up like a WASM version of the tsgo compiler and build a playground, and someone's already done that, it's about as fast, maybe like a little slower than the current compiler implementation. So it's not too slow to have like a playground in the web.
Okay. Yeah, and I believe we linked to that in an earlier episode. Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, was there anything else?
You know, what was really interesting is how they did the conversion. Is they built a new tool called ts2go to take the abstract syntax tree of the TypeScript compiler and output syntactically correct Go code. And that's how they did the port.
That's cool.
Which I thought was really interesting. And I'll link to that in the show notes if you're curious to take a look at that, because that you might say like, oh, why didn't you use an LLM to do that? Well, they were talking about that because you want something that's deterministic for a port. You don't want something that has any kind of randomness. And if you're porting large swaths of code, you know, LLMs are great at getting it like mostly right and then missing a few lines or something. Yes. And then what you need to do is you'd have to go through line by line and verify that it was translated correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As soon as you can't trust that a few lines are missing, then you have to check the entire output.
That's right. And Anders made a good point that like you still use LLMs, but use LLMs to make the tool that is deterministic.
Sure.
So that's the point they made with ts2go.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, we have quite a bit more to get through. Should we move on to the next major piece of news item?
Yes. Zod 4 is officially released.
As of like 5 or 6 days ago. Woohoo!
We love Zod.
Yeah, so here's something that's interesting. I was looking for the NPM version that was version 4, but that doesn't exist. So what they did was they actually put it in the 3.25 release version, and it's under a different import path. It's like /v4 or something like that.
Do you know why they did that?
I think for backwards compatibility and for migration purposes so that people could safely kind of migrate.
That makes sense.
But you know who we could ask? Colin. He's the one who created it. He's the one
we need to get Colin on the show.
That invite is in progress, and we're going to look funny if he doesn't accept it. I'll just have to edit this out if he doesn't accept it, right? But hopefully, neither of us are really Zod experts, and we don't want to, make a fool of ourselves talking about what's really new in version 4. So I invited Colin onto the show. I just did it yesterday, so it's fine, if it takes a while to get him on. But I think there's definitely a lot, and I can't really go through it a ton. There's huge perf improvements, though. But as someone who is not really familiar with even like the previous version of Zod, I can't really speak to like all the stuff that's new.
I think the big thing for me, like a lot of the things that we talked about before, was a lot of like the paper cuts that you get like when you're looking at developing a Zod schema, where you have like maybe a deeply nested schema of schemas, and then you get an error, and then you see the Zod error that comes out is pretty heinous in the past, and now there's a pretty printing element to it. So you get much nicer errors instead of kind of the gobbledygook you used to get before that were very difficult to read. So that's pretty cool. A lot of improvements to built-in stuff, a lot of customization options that you get. The list goes on and on. It's super nice.
Yeah, I think that would be great if we can do, like, we want to do a deep dive on Zod, obviously. So in the best case, we'll get Colin on and we'll do a deep dive, but otherwise we'll have to cover Zod in more detail, because I know there's still people that are not as familiar with Zod, and like I haven't used it a ton. I've used it very basically to like validate form data and stuff like that. But I could definitely stand to learn a lot more about Zod.
Yeah, I will go and upgrade the Excalibur tiled plugin with the latest Zod and report back.
Cool.
Maybe in that episode with Colin,
yeah,
if we get Colin on, about like what the process was like and what things were better or worse.
Sweet. All right. Next up in Deno.land, we've got a couple different things. They have a article that they published last week that says reports of Deno's demise are greatly exaggerated. You know what's funny about this is that we actually last week recorded a discussion about this because we were reacting to one of the articles that was about Deno's demise, purported demise. And we were just recording some of our thoughts on that, why we agreed with some of it, why we disagreed with some of it. I don't want to spoil it though. So I think what we're going to do, I was just talking to Eric about this. I think we will do a bonus discussion episode, maybe this Thursday. I'm not sure when. I have it recorded. So we have our thoughts before this article came out, and then we'll record our thoughts like after reading this and understanding more about Deno's strategy and where they are right now, so that we can see, were we on point when we initially reacted to this, or were we off point? Where were we wrong, or something like that? So anyway, I think that'll be kind of a fun little bonus discussion, but otherwise it's going to be too much to discuss right now. But I would just suggest listeners go read that blog article and get a sort of like state of the state of where Deno is right now.
Yeah. And I think it'll be a very interesting conversation because I think we had some takes. The source material we were talking about had some takes, and I think I was wrong on a couple, and I've changed my opinion about a couple. So that'll be interesting to talk about.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Cool. I think moving into more JavaScripty news, you had something from our friend Stefan, who runs Web Weekly. He had a thread on import JSON. Do you want to explain that?
Yes, this is huge. So finally, with Firefox 138, all major browser engines support import attributes to import JSON from ES modules. This is big because before you needed a bundler to do this. And before, like, okay, what does that mean? Like, we could always import JSON. Well, the problem was, like, if you just did import thing from thing, the browser didn't know it was JSON. So if you put a script in there, it was suddenly a security problem, even though you intended as the author to import JSON. So this is very interesting. So you can say import data from resource.json with type JSON, and then it's validated so that you can't, bait and switch and throw a script in there and do some badness.
Yes. And because our listeners are not looking at the code, like, it's essentially right after the import file name, there's a with keyword, and then in curly braces, there are like attributes you can pass, like type : JSON. So you can say like, this is a type JSON. I imagine that there might be other types of import attributes.
There are a few that have been kicked around. I think there's one that I know of is text. Like someone has proposed that type text be added. And I think there's a few other like WebAssembly be added. I think JSON is the only one that is actually spec'd and fully implemented in browsers. But there's a few that I think bundlers like Vite will also support. Like I think text is supported in Vite.
That's what I was going to say is I wonder, now that this is more standardized across the browser engines, does this also change with bundlers? Because I haven't seen the syntax before with a bundler.
Yeah. And a lot of times with bundlers, what we wind up doing is, like, for example, in Webpack, you would make a loader that would say, hey, is this file this extension, then load it as text. So it's kind of like external to the code. Like you would configure how it would be loaded. And Vite does something similar where you add like magic query strings to the from import file name. You might do raw if you want text, for example. So
I've seen that.
raw.
Yep.
So that's how bundlers do it, like typically today. So like, I think you could still do that too with Webpack. I just was giving an example of loaders, but you can also dictate like with magic strings, a lot of the bundlers to do different behavior.
Yes, I remember using those to do like the raw loader for some of our asset files and stuff. Cool. We've got a Node experimental new feature that came in a new minor release and was backported, and that is the node.config.json file. This is an experimental way to basically set the node options environment variable with a JSON config file.
I'm so happy.
Yeah, I think this will make some people happy. I feel like I haven't needed to do a whole lot of node options besides maybe SSL stuff, but yeah, I think this is a nice cleaner way to do it. That's for sure, because then you can just have it inside of your project. You don't need to like document or, export node options in a script or something like that. This can just be Node will just read the config file if it's there, and we'll use those node options. You don't have to instruct people on how to do it.
Yeah. And for me, this just feels like a reduction in magic.
Yeah.
Like when there's a config file versus like having environment variables that you need to know of they're kind of opaque anyway. This just feels better.
By the way, I saw this from someone on Blue Sky, and I forget who it was because I don't think I saved the thread. He was basically saying, I don't like how we have these config files at the root level. The libraries and frameworks that do it correctly allow you to put it in like a .config directory at the top level so that you can put all of your config files there rather than like mucking up the root. And I agree. I think that would be great. And I don't know if this supports that. I suppose we could read the documentation and find out. But I just wanted to say that I agree with that developer experience because we get so many config files at the root otherwise.
Yeah. Brief aside, I have been thinking about doing something about this for the EX code bases because there's like a good dozen config files like that are in the root. It would be nice to not have them there.
It says if the experimental default config file flag is present, Node.js will look for a node.config.json file in the current working directory and load it as a configuration file. So I'm reading that means you can't pass a path to it, but if you execute it from the .config directory, then maybe that would work, I suppose, because it's whatever the working directory is.
Maybe?
Yeah, I don't know, but since it's experimental, I suppose consider this some feedback that it would be cool to be able to load it from a known location like a .config directory, or at least pass it in or something. Sweet.
Nice.
The other thing is that it adds, I think because of a V8 update, it adds more support for the await using, like resource cleanup language feature. And if you are wondering what is await using, I have linked, and I will include in the show notes, a blog post on the V8 site about explicit resource management. So you can learn a little bit more about that. And we did cover that a bit in our Node 24 deep dive if you want to listen to that.
Yeah, and that's currently shipping in Chrome 134 plus, Firefox 134 plus, and Babel. Safari, as far as I can tell here, is not yet shipping that feature.
Oh, that's too bad. TypeScript FM is sponsored by Excalibur.js, the friendly TypeScript game engine for the web. Like many of you, I got into computers because I loved video games and dreamed of making one, but game development always felt a bit intimidating. Instead, I built a career in web development, though that dream of making games never really went away. Then I met Eric, who showed me I could use my HTML, CSS, and JavaScript skills to create games with just a bit of game design knowledge and the right engine. Excalibur.js makes game development approachable, offering everything you need to build 2D web games. Arcade physics, sprites, animations, input support, and integrations with tools like Tiled and Sprite. It's beginner-friendly, yet flexible enough to grow with you. Our team has published 10 games using Excalibur, all written in TypeScript. If you're a web developer looking to dip your toes into game dev or sharpen your TypeScript skills, give Excalibur.js a try at excalibur.js.com. Click the big tutorial button to start building your first game, Excalibur, a Flappy Bird clone. After that, join our friendly Discord community of web developers who love to help each other and share game dev tips. Okay, should we move on to some of the community highlights?
Yeah.
Cool.
Dino just posted a brief history of JavaScript, which was very interesting to read.
Yeah.
They go through kind of the whole brief summary of how things came to be and how Deno showed up on the block.
You know, JavaScript is 30 years old.
Yeah, it makes me sad.
Makes me feel old. Well, I guess I am old.
It's happening one day at a time. Hopefully that's the rate that it's happening.
Yeah.
Not faster.
Oh, and so for the record, TypeScript was introduced by Microsoft in 2012. So
yes.
In case we've said it differently, I think one time we said it was maybe 2011 or something, but it's 2012.
It's 2012. And I think Excalibur started in like January of 2013. So
okay.
It was late. It was early 2013 because we were all excited about TypeScript.
That's right. All right. Next up, we've talked about tsdown before. So that is a bundler that is opinionated for library development if you're building a TypeScript library. And I saw Kevin from the Vite team said that tsdown now has Unbundle support. And you might be wondering, what's unbundling? So that's essentially where it basically does not bundle the output. It mirrors what the source input was. So it mirrors your source module structure. So rather than producing a single bundled file for each entry, in this mode, each source file is compiled and transformed individually, and the output directory will contain a one-to-one mapping of your source files to output files. And I'm just reading from the documentation. It says, this approach is often referred to as a bundleless or transpile-only build, where the focus is on transforming code rather than bundling it together.
Yeah, and TypeScript will do this for you, where it'll take I think if you run it in just vanilla, you just run tsc on a directory, this is what it'll do.
Yeah, and so one of the questions was, how is this different from just using tsc? Well, because tsdown is powered by Rolldown, you get all the bundler stuff. So like we said before, I think Excalibur would be looking at tsdown potentially as a bundler because it supports the different asset types, and then it also generates the declaration files. And I think that we would want this mode because then it makes importing from your library easier on consumers because they can import from individual parts of your tree or, parts of your directories rather than just from a single entry point, as far as I understand why you would want to do that.
Awesome.
Related to tsdown, Vite now has a Rolldown preview. So there's a preview NPM package. And so if you want to try Vite with the new Rolldown support, you can try that. But the migration isn't complete, so it's a separate package. But this is huge because remember in our Vite episode, we mentioned one of the sort of limitations was that when you build with dev mode, it doesn't necessarily match production mode because they're using two different approaches. By migrating to Rolldown, it's going to unify the build. So what happens in dev will pretty much match what happens in prod, besides probably like optimizations like minification and stuff. So that's going to go a whole long way towards like being confident that your dev build is going to match what you see in prod. So that's huge.
Yeah, this has been a huge source of pain for me because it usually works, except when it doesn't. And I forget to check the prod build and it's like, oh, you broke the website. And it's like, damn, I forgot to check it.
Cool. Speaking of folks giving talks from the TypeScript team, Jake Bailey, who you probably know is on the TypeScript team, is going to be talking about TS Go at Gophercon. So if we have any Golang developers in the audience and we'll be attending Gophercon, you can attend that. And I believe he said it'll be recorded too. So once that goes live, we'll let you know and we'll link to that so that you can watch it. Another cool thing that happened in the community I saw on Reddit, someone posted a modern Lodash alternative that's TypeScript-first, and it's called super-utils-plus. So I will link to that. But I think if you are looking for something that's a little bit better typed than Lodash, because there are some typing limitations that Lodash has when you're doing some like collection utilities and stuff, they're not always fully typed. So this library sets out to fix that. So it is developed TypeScript-first. So you could definitely go check that out. And then the other thing that I saw was something called tsc.run. This is supposed to be a TypeScript-first serverless framework. And so it's not like a cloud that you run stuff on. It's actually a framework that's cloud agnostic. So I think right now it's supported on AWS, but they also want to support GCP. And I assume, something like Azure Functions. And maybe down the road, I would also assume like Deno deploy. So it's basically a framework that lets you build serverless TypeScript full stack apps. So that's kind of neat. And they're looking for feedback too, if you want to go check that out and give them some feedback.
Yeah. Also, another really interesting video came across my desk, which was how to create a TypeScript library that runs everywhere in 2025. So I think this is a thing that a lot of people struggle with, especially as things have evolved over time and the facts on the ground have changed over time. But Florian makes a pretty short video here. It's only 13 minutes long. Check it out. And it's really showing that things have simplified in this new world order in 2025. So
Nice.
the state is better than it was.
That's cool. I wonder if it's going to get even simpler if you just say use tsdown, because it's designed for being a TypeScript library.
One can only hope.
Yeah, that'd be sweet. And then last but not least, if you know someone or you yourself are looking for a job that specializes in TypeScript, there is a new jobs board called TypeScript.jobs. If you go to that URL, you will see a job board that is just for TypeScript jobs. And those folks are looking for feedback. So if you find that it's helpful, or maybe if you have some suggestions, you can chime in on the Reddit thread where they're looking for feedback. But I thought that might be helpful for anyone that is certainly kind of in the market and wants to specialize in like something that's TypeScript.
Awesome. Well, we have some cool stuff that we found.
Yeah, cool stuff. Why don't you go first?
Yeah. So part of NDC Oslo is hanging out with lots of other speakers, and I made a new friend, Daniel Ranis, at NDC, and he showed me a really cool tool called sli.dev. So it's like slide, but it's spelled sli.dev, and it's a Markdown based way of doing slides, and it's pretty slick. I like it a lot. It's really neat. Kind of takes a lot of the nonsense out of it, and it lets you just get to the details. So, yeah, it was a really cool way of doing slides, and I might just do that next time because I have been doing Google Slides, and this is the other cool thing I have. If you are a person who does Google Slides, and Roman Nurek produced a Google Slides code highlighter where you can just copy and paste, and that is all of the code in my last talk went through this tool. So definitely check it out.
Related to that, our good friend Alan in real life told us about a presentation library that he just found called Presenter M. And it's similar where it's Markdown based, but I think the cool part of it is that you can actually present it in your terminal. So that's not mind blowing.
This was made for me.
Yeah. So you should check that out. Personally, I'm really lazy and I use slides.com and I pay for it. And that's how all my presentations are usually given, is either through that, if I'm doing a public talk, or if I'm doing like a course or something like that, I just use PowerPoint. But I really like slides.com. It's actually built on top of reveal.js, if you're familiar with that. But they add a lot of niceties, including code syntax highlighting and stuff like that. So I don't need to worry about it. But it's also a paid tool.
That's right. A couple of cool things that also came across my desk is the Wookash podcast. I recommend anyone listen to their deep dive interviews with technical people that you have most certainly heard of. And there's a really awesome 2-hour-long podcast episode where he interviews Andreas Kling about his new browser, Ladybird, which is really cool and makes me really excited for the future of the web to see like Andreas take on this like monumental task and to build a new browser.
Listen, I just have one request for anyone who's building a browser. Please don't make it like Microsoft Edge where it freezes all the time. I posted a thread on Blue Sky about this, but my Microsoft Edge, when I have like over 200 tabs open in one of my workspaces, it just freezes. It's so disappointing. But the thing is I really like the vertical tabs. I really like tab groups. And I really like the workspaces feature. And I feel like I can't live without those. But as soon as someone designs a browser that has all those three features, I will migrate over.
Yeah. You're a fickle fan.
Yeah, that's right.
And then 2 other videos that came across my desk that were interesting. There's a video from Purple Mind about how computers generate massive primes in seconds and how they do like probabilistic primality tests. And I'm a math nerd. I enjoyed that video. If you are also a math nerd, you might also enjoy that video.
Cool.
Another thing that is near and dear to my heart is Playwright testing. So there's a build session from last week about doing advanced Playwright debugging and test resilience.
Cool.
So definitely check that out. Just really good advice for building like Playwright tests that don't make you sad later.
Nice. That's neat. I've got 3 things in addition to what I already mentioned. So we kind of know that AI is having a huge impact on our energy usage, but no one has done a deep dive into what exactly that means. So been a lot of speculation and like guesswork. But recently, MIT Technology Review has done a huge in-depth series on this, and it's like banger after banger, like really, really good reporting and journalism on this. So I highly recommend going to take a look at that. I'll include a link, but if you just search for Technology Review AI energy usage, you'll find it. It's really good stuff. Second of all, we talked a little bit about JavaScript performance, but specifically, if you have an Electron app, and if you've heard some of the complaints about Discord, which is an Electron app, a lot of people believe that it's slow, and I would tend to agree. But that doesn't have to be the case. There is an article by, I think it's Amala, and they are the maintainer of Electron React Boilerplate. So they've worked on these issues for years, and they have a really great article. I think it's 6 ways that some of these really large Electron apps have improved their performance, and stuff you can do to do the same thing. So if you're working on an Electron app and you're kind of complaining about its performance, maybe have a look at this article. There might be some gold in there.
Yeah, and it's all things that you would think of. I'm like scrolling through the article, and you will not be surprised by any of them, I think.
Yeah, unless you haven't done it before, then maybe you will be.
Yeah, maybe you will be surprised. This is all like very reasonable advice.
That's good. And then lastly, this is just kind of a for fun thing. There is a Reddit thread that kind of went viral last week. The title is, "My new favorite hobby is watching Microsoft employees being slowly driven insane by AI Copilot." And this kind of blew up a ton if you actually go look at some of the PRs that they link to. Those PRs now have like 1,000 comments on them and stuff. So it kind of got a little bit wild, but it is sort of interesting. And I have thoughts about this, but we don't really need to get into them. I just think it was kind of a fun popcorn thread, so you should go take a look at it because it's sort of entertaining.
My schadenfreude is directed at the Microsoft leaders pushing the AI hype. Please be respectful towards the devs. That is the sign off on this post. So please be respectful towards the devs.
Yeah. What I will say is at Microsoft Build, there was a pretty good session by Stephen Tobe and David Fowler on how Microsoft employees use Copilot. And they do talk about some really interesting things. So I would definitely take a look at that. It's not they actually don't really use it too much for code generation. They use it for a lot of other purposes that I've used for myself, and I've found helpful. Stuff like ideation and sort of thinking about new ideas and stuff, or, like a rubber duck, basically. It's a really fancy rubber duck. So you can go check that out. I'll link to that breakout session. But I think that's all we got today. Did we forget anything?
No, I think that's a show.
That's a show. Cool. Well, we'll see y'all next time. That's Cameron and Eric signing off. See you later.
Signing off. See you next time.
Hi, everyone. This is Kamran. I just wanted to thank you for listening to the show, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. If you want to see the show notes, you can check your podcast player or go to TypeScript.fm, where you'll see a list of all the episodes. If you enjoyed the show, tell your friends, and please rate it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, because that's how the show grows and gets discovered by more people. If you want to suggest news or a project that should be covered, or just want to say hi, email us at feedback@typescript.fm. If you want to follow us on social, we're both active on Blue Sky. I'm at comronicus.com, and Eric is at ericonerheim.com. You can also follow the show directly at typescript.fm.